Welcome to all of you. My name is Eduard van der Haas. I'm a Market Intelligence Program Manager at CBI, and I will be your host today for this webinar on European trends and opportunities for natural ingredients for health products. A few general and practical remarks to start with. Please note that we cannot hear or see you. You still, though, have the possibility to interact with us throughout the questions tab, and we will consult these questions and answer a selection of them. Please also complete our short survey at the end of the webinar in order for us to gather your feedback on this session. And lastly, if you have any audio or technical problems during this session, we advise you to switch the phone call modus to solve the problem. Main topic of today will be trends and opportunities on the European markets of natural ingredients for health products. And I would like to give a warm welcome to our two presenters of today, Lisanne Groothuis, a profound consultant and advisor in development, and Gustavo Ferro, an independent consultant with a large experience in natural ingredients research. Going through today's agenda, we will start with a short introduction of CBI and then move on to our experts with the sector and product definition. They will also give you an overview of the current European demand and highlight the trends and implications for SMEs, and end with practical recommendations for you as an exporter. The last 15 minutes of the session will give us the possibility to go through your questions, and we expect to finish in 1.5 hours, so 4:30 Central European time. So starting with a short presentation of our organization, CBI stands for Center for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. We're part of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. Our work is funded and commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. CBI was established in the 1970s, so we have more than 50 years of experience in contributing to local sustainable economic development through exports. We mainly focus ourselves on SMEs from more than 70 different countries to build sustainable trade relationships with European buyers. We also contribute directly to several sustainable development goals, such as decent work and economic growth. We also pay special attention to women and youth in SMEs, and we stimulate sustainable production and trade as we encourage partnerships for the goals. Looking at our geographical reach, as you can see, we mainly focus ourselves on regions such as Middle East and North Africa, Sahel, West Africa, as well as on projects in specific Asian countries, mainly in Southeast Asia. We cover 13 different sectors based on dynamic and promising fields and industries. Natural ingredients play an important role in the selection of sectors, with natural ingredients for cosmetics, natural food additives, and of course, the most relevant for you, natural ingredients for health products. Our projects rely on several support solutions for SMEs and business support organizations, such as helping you exhibit at leading European trade fairs, but also throughout export coaching programs with individual trainings, coaching, and market entry activities on different levels, like, for instance, marketing or commercial habits. You'll see a few examples of current 4-year export projects on the right side of your screen. For instance, women's economic empowerment in Kenya, shea in Nigeria, moringa in Burkina Faso, and olive oil in Jordan. Our main resource is market intelligence, for sure, with easy access and free of charge studies on our website. I'm trying to give you the most practical answers to your questions, like, for instance, which countries offer the most opportunities, and what channels should you use to enter the European market in your sector, or what laws and requirements must you follow. On the right side, you'll see the main page of our exporting natural ingredients for health products to Europe websites. You'll see that we publish a number of stack source studies, but also tips and product studies. You also have access to social media canals like LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And for me, it's now the moment to pass the floor to our two presenters of today, Lisanne Groothuis and Gustavo Ferro.
All right, I was just waiting for my camera to connect. Thank you, Edward. I think Lisanne will be the first one to introduce herself, but first we would like to conduct a poll with our participants on this webinar, just to get to know you guys before we introduce ourselves more extensively. And also just while Zamzam can publish the poll, helping us out, to welcome her and Edward in this webinar, as well as our support team from CBI. Thank you so much for hosting this webinar. So the first poll, I think Lisanne has the...
I just think I was on mute all the time while I was
No,
talking.
there was I think when the poll was published, there was an issue with the audio, because now I can hear again also.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, apologies for that. So thank you. So let's see what the the answers to these questions are whether you are selling natural ingredients to the European market at this moment. All right, okay. So yeah, no surprise that again, like about a quarter, it does not represent a company. That is in alignment with the first question, but very interesting that half of those who answered is at the moment not selling natural ingredients to the European market, but is very interested in entering the European market. And I think that's great to hear, because I think we will have some very interesting information and insights that can maybe help you on your journey to enter the market. So I think we can close the polls and maybe
close the poll, yeah.
start to give a very short introduction about ourselves before we go deeper into the content.
Maybe just for the technical team, when the poll opens, I lose audio and I cannot see the webcam. That's just a detail. Let's go on. Lisanne, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name is Lisanne Groothuis. I'm from the Netherlands, and I've been a market researcher for CBI since 2018. I've been active in various sectors, from coffee, cacao, honey, and of course, the natural ingredients, as Edward already explained, very important sector for CBI. And I've been working both on the cosmetics, food additives, and of course, the health products. I work for Profound, which is a Dutch consultancy company, and we work towards developing sustainable supply chains, value chains, where we also assist entrepreneurs in gaining market access. And we do this for a variety of products, including natural ingredients for food, health, and cosmetics.
I would then shortly introduce myself as well. I'm an independent consultant associated with Profound, and I used to work at Profound actually for 11 years. And now for 5 years, I'm collaborating as associate expert. I'm also working with the Swiss Import Promotion Program and with the German Import Promotion Desk, also in natural ingredients and other products related also to specialty agricultural sectors. Since 2008, it's been a very long time, and I think CBI has also been quite pioneer in publishing information about natural ingredients. And since 2008, I've been participating as a market analyst for CBI in natural ingredients for health, cosmetics, food additives, and also some other subsectors like essential oils, vegetable oils, oil seeds, etc. And also some other specialty sectors like coffee and cacao. And also I have some other work experience in natural ingredients through UNIDO, through Swiss Contact, and other agencies like World Bank, UNDP, GIZ, and Enable. So this has been a little bit my experience in publishing the studies. And maybe just a note before we continue, this is, of course, the first year that we are writing again, Lisanne and myself and the team of Profound, the studies for natural ingredients for health products. We would like you guys to stay tuned with us, of course, in the next years when we have these webinars, and also suggest other subjects that we can talk about in these webinars. Just to make sure, Lisanne, can you just give me a sign that my audio is working, because we had that technical issue?
Yeah, no, perfect.
Everything is okay. Okay, great.
Yes.
So when we were debating where to start in this first webinar that we are doing for natural ingredients for health products, we actually debated that we should start with a little bit of a sector and product definition. So what do we mean when we talk about natural ingredients for health products? So when we consider natural ingredients in the framework of the CBI studies, we consider some certain ingredient categories, including medicinal aromatic plants, dried medicinal aromatic plants, extracts and saps, different kinds of extracts to different types of extraction methods, different saps as well that are extracted in different ways, essential oils, oleoresins, vegetable oils, fats, waxes, and finally some forms of processed fruit, vegetables, nuts and grains. What is interesting here is when you look at the right-handed side, all the way on the right-handed side, you see the end-using industries. So here we have food, cosmetics, health. And in between, you have the areas which are part of sometimes two of these big sectors, such as food supplements, for example, such as cosmeceuticals. And what you see in the middle is that according to these end using segments, the regulation and other market requirements, they change because the end using industries, they require different things in terms of different regulatory requirements, different legal requirements, different product quality and safety, and how quality and safety are defined. Also, buyers work differently because they work with different products for different purposes. So the bio requirements sometimes for one ingredient coming from natural sources can be different according to the industry that you aim at exporting to. So this is very important to understand, and also certification expectations and requirements in that respect. So, and of course, all of these things, both the end use and also the regulation, all the market requirements, they're pretty much linked with the market and consumer trends. And this is the main focus that we are doing today, what we are talking about and how it defines the whole industry. So we are talking about trends, but basically we are trying to talk about the whole chain when you talk about market trends and consumer trends here that we are addressing. This figure was originally published by Profound in 2011. It's just a little bit adapted from the figure. So this is just to explain what we are focusing on here when we talk about natural ingredients for health products. So basically, we are talking about natural botanical ingredients for health products. And in the context of the CBI studies, we focus on health products that are food supplements and herbal medicinal products. So for food supplements, in terms of its regulatory definition, it's products that are intended to correct nutritional deficiencies, also to maintain an adequate intake of certain nutrients or to support specific physiological functions. So this is to say that they supplement the daily diet. You cannot declare within a food supplement and the ingredients that compose food supplements any preventive, therapeutic, or healing properties. So this is very important because it is distinguished in a very clear way from herbal medicinal products, which are medicinal products whose active ingredients contain plants, plant parts, or materials, and the combinations thereof. So they are specifically formulated to treat and cure diseases. So the regulatory framework and how they are defined under the industry is also different. So this is what I want to explain in the next slide. It has a huge implication if you want to export to one type of subsector or the other, because it's very important that you check for the authorized uses of these ingredients that you'd like to market in the EU. So this is the first step for you. Pay attention to definitions and pay attention to the regulatory framework that is defining this ingredient as per use in food supplements or as a herbal medicinal product. And here's what you need to know. Food supplements, they're regulated like foodstuffs. So they must be approved by the novel food regulation. They must not be a novel food. They must have gone through safety assessments, and they must not cause harm to humans, basically. So the authorization of herbal substances for use in food supplements, however, is not centralized. So novel food is centralized approval, but the use of the herbal substances for food supplements is not done in a centralized way, because each EU country has to publish a positive list of plants that are authorized for use in food supplements, together with some mandatory warnings and the maximum levels that these ingredients can be used in a food supplement. This is very important because this is regulated by the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA. I'm just going to drink some water. For herbal medicine products, it's basically the regulation comes from the European Medicines Agency, and the Committee on Herbal Medicine Products, the HMPC, they compile and they assess scientific data on the herbal substances with a focus on safety and efficacy. So this is a bit different from the approval for food supplements, because the efficacy here is a super important focus. And the scientific opinion from this agency is compiled into an EU herbal monograph, which contains all the necessary information that this ingredient contains to be used in a medicinal product. It's very important to highlight here that botanicals, even though they're from natural source, they're also under constant scientific safety assessment by EU authorities. So for example, the EFSA has a platform called the Compendium of Botanicals, where you can search for the main risks that specific botanical ingredients have on human health. So even though they might be approved, they are also under constant assessment for safety as well. I see some questions here popping up on the chat. This is just to say that we will monitor the questions as well so that we can answer them at the end of the session. This is an example of a food supplement positive list. So as I mentioned, the positive lists, they are published by each EU country. And here's an example of the Belgium list. There have been some efforts, especially between Belgium, France, and Italy, which is called the Belfrit list, to publish a common list that can be used by different countries. But some countries do make unilateral changes to this list as well. So it's important that when you want to market within a specific country, that you are aware of the agency that is controlling and approving the substances, and also that you can find your own ingredient in those lists and take a look at the details on these approvals. And I just wanted to show you guys also the EU herbal monograph, which is for use in medicinal products. And this is an example from Hypericum perforatum, which is the St. John's wort. And it's important to know here that these are the instructions for use of these botanicals in specific formulations for medicine. So it's different because, as you can see here, you have some information on the characteristics, the contraindications, special warnings, precautions for use. So it's pretty much related to also posology for use in a medicinal product, which is different from an approval for food supplements. Also important to mention here is that, of course, this approval process is much extensive than an approval process for food supplements, because the ingredient goes through clinical trials, etc. And you have a differentiation here on the well-established use, which means that this ingredient must be used in such approved efficacy, safety for more than 10 years on the EU market. So it is quite extensive, and it is based on very strenuous scientific data. And when you have traditional use, it means that it has been used for 30 years and at least 15 years within the EU market, where there is a history of use and experience, and also with sufficient safety and efficacy data. After just giving you guys a bit of the definition between this difference between the food supplements and the herbal medicinal products, I just would like to highlight some of the difficulties in studying natural ingredients from a market analysis perspective, and also the difficulties to assess demand in natural ingredients. Of course, you guys know this when you're a support organization or when you're a producer, there is a very important lack of detailed statistic data. In the studies, you will find that we do publish some data, but unfortunately, these data are not available at a very product specific level. So this is a difficulty in studying natural ingredients, is that it doesn't go so specifically into specific products. So we have to group them into specific product groups. For example, essential oils, different saps and extracts, but it doesn't go always into product detail. So it creates little transparency and, of course, specificity in that respect. And also, a lot of these ingredients, they can be used for different industries. So sometimes when you look at the trade flows, a certain ingredient is going to a specific country like Germany, Netherlands, etc. But we don't know which industry is using these ingredients. So it could be that it's used for medicinal purpose. It could be that it's going for cosmetics. So we don't have that in the trade flows when you analyze the data from official statistic sources. Also interesting to highlight here is the complexity in the regulation. So in order to understand trade flows, it's also important to understand whether a certain ingredient is allowed on that market or not. So it's important to understand the basic regulatory requirements. And depending on the ingredient, it might be that a certain trade flow relates to the activities of one company, for example. So it's very important to understand, apart from the trade data in itself, understand who's active, what companies and what kind of players are on the specific markets for certain ingredients. And that you cannot get from statistical data, and also sometimes because information is confidential. So these are the main challenges we're facing here. And that's why it's super important. That's why we try to highlight also in this session the importance of understanding the main drivers, the trends, and also the market developments in natural ingredients for health products. And an exercise that we will do here is to link these drivers, trends, and developments to specific ingredients. So what we're going to try to do is then to give you guys some examples. But first, I want to start from the very beginning, which is the drivers. So in order to assess the demand or the growing demand for health products, we have to understand a little bit of the demographic developments in the EU, which is our target market here. It's the market we are writing about and trying to present about. So it's important to understand that we are facing an aging population. For those that have studied human geography and demographics, etc., you recognize this pyramid that you can see on the right-hand side. And you know that the usual situation is where you have a pyramid, not a reverse pyramid where the top is wider than the base. And here you can see that this is changing in Europe. And so by 2050, for example, we have more than 13% fewer people under 55 living in the region. So this is quite a big change in demographics. And also this places increased pressure on long-term healthcare. And of course, it increases healthcare costs. So we also see that this is, of course, associated with the increasing health problems like cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. And this indeed contributes to the increasing uptake of food supplements for preventive health purposes. So some examples of ingredient categories that can be associated with increase in consumption of food supplements and other health products are ingredients that can be rich in antioxidants, ingredients that support metabolism and overall health, as well as those that contribute to muscular structure, immunity boosters, etc. And we're going to see that these are also related to the trends that we can see on the market and related to product launches. So Lisanne will tell us a little bit about that, but it's very interesting to see how demographics can be such an interesting driver for such developments that we can see on the market as well. I also wanted to highlight the growth in over-the-counter and self-care products. And here, just to highlight one figure, the over-the-counter drug market was worth an estimated more than $35 billion US dollar in 2021. So it is a huge market and expected to grow. So this is a very important figure to keep in mind when you look at potential for growth and potential as to how this influences also what we are talking about here, which is health products. Yeah, and this, of course, it has to do with new forms of disease prevention and treatment, which also contributes to growing awareness about self-care and wellness products. And of course, the idea of convenience, easy accessibility, and lower costs that over-the-counter and self-care medication brings to consumer. So you can also see that we're talking about Europe and the EU in general, but you can see some differences on the right-hand side within the European market. In some markets, there is more culture and more acceptance and more consumer acceptance of self-care, over-the-counter medication. It also has to do with regulatory frameworks on the pharmaceutical industry. But you can see here in Northern Europe, in yeah, the UK, in Finland, etc. These are high. Germany, you can see these are markets that have a high consumption, and other markets such as Spain, Italy, etc. They do have a lower consumption in general of self-care products. Interesting to say, there are more than 4,000 health products available over the counter, and more you have plant-based options. So this is an interesting development because when you talk about over-the-counter self-care, we're not only talking about botanical ingredients, but this shows an indication. It shows that it's a driver for us to understand a growing demand for such ingredients. It's important to draw the distinction here. Okay, so also we see in growth in the over-the-counter and self-care, we see that Europe had most of the product launches in terms of self-care products in 2021, 2022, accounting for 40% of product launches globally. So it's interesting to associate that, and that's where we are getting more and more specific to specific product categories. Most of the launches, they were related to immunity health, and this we can see that is pretty much associated also to our COVID pandemic experience and post-COVID. So there is a high focus on immunity health. And this is an interesting thing to see that is also associated to brain mood health, which is also an area that we're going to show to you guys that is an increasing category, growing also in terms of ingredients. And also some fast growing claims in supplement launches have been mental acuity, 81%, and insomnia, 54%. And this is according to Nutrition Insight publication, but these figures are coming from the Innova Market Insights. This starts giving us some hints as to how to study potential for your specific ingredients. It's important that you link categories, growing categories, with what your ingredients can be used for in the European market. So we'll get there in the next slides. Lisanne, is there anything that I left behind? No.
No.
Go
yes. Ahead. So I will be speaking for the next minutes. So I think Gustavo just gave a very good overview of some of those proxies for demand for health products on the European market. And now the idea is to have like a little bit of a closer look at the market. So what is out there? What kind of products can you find? What kind of ingredients, of course? And we are focusing more on the food supplement side. And like if you look at those food supplements, they are often used as preventive health products, where consumers take them to either prevent a disease or just feel good and healthy. And many of the products on the market are really like targeting overall health and overall well-being, which have some general claims. But at the same time, there are many other products that are more specifically used for specific health concerns. And what we see here on the slide is a print screen of the web shop of Swenson, a specific food supplement brand. And they, on their web shop, like they talk about those health concerns, and they group them into specific areas, the bone health, brain health, stress support. And if you click, and this is also an invitation to you to do like a little bit of your own research, to go to these websites or brands or web shops and to see what kind of products are linked to each like health concern. Because if you click on some of those products or categories, you can see that some of the products are include like a mixture of several ingredients, but you also see that there are quite a lot of like, as I call them, like standalone ingredients, and those are really those ingredients that have like a strong track record of proven efficacy and are also well known on the market. And the example I am going to point out here is specifically on brain health, on like this cognitive function, where ginkgo biloba, a herb from Asia, is very well known and has like this very strong, like proven in clinical proof of the function of the herb to improve like memory and concentration. So it's really interesting to just play around and look at these websites to see what is out there. So on the next slide, as Gustavo already said, like immunity boosting or immunity health is a very important category on the European market. And as also said by Gustavo, it was very much driven by COVID, but also now like post-COVID era, it's still a very strong and growing like segment within those food supplement markets that is also expected to continue to grow. And when we talk about immune boosting botanicals, they can be defined in different ways. Those are mainly, and now I'm reading from the screen, like botanicals with a high vitamin or mineral content, strong antioxidant effects or anti-inflammatory, antiviral, or they have antibacterial properties. And some of the examples given here on the left side of the screen are well-known ingredients used as like immunity boosting on the European market. And of course, these are just examples. There are many more examples that we could have picked, but the ones here are ginger, echinacea, turmeric, ginseng, and ashwagandha. And if you look like more in depth at this immunity boosting and at this segment, what is interesting is that most of the products that are actually on the market are vitamins. So no botanicals, but really like a vitamin segment is like the largest and the most popular on the European market. But this is very closely followed by herbal extracts, which is, well, good news for all of us who are here, because it is a very important category within those, immune boosting, within the immune boosting segment. On the next slide,
maybe just a detail here. Yeah, it's interesting just to see how the different ingredients, even though they serve for immunity boosting, they act differently, and they act sometimes in different parts of the body. So this is what you were trying to emphasize. Some of them, they do have the antioxidant effects. Some of them, they have a function on anti-inflammatory activities. So this is what is interesting. Even though they belong to the same category, they have different mechanisms of activity within the body.
So because this is such a growing and important category in the food supplements market, you'll really see that manufacturers and brands want to innovate and respond like with new products. So what you see is, so for instance, at Vita Foods, I don't know if many of you have also visited one of a very important trade fair in the health industry. Like last year when I was there, I saw the gummy industry. It was already growing, but it's growing more and more and more. So this is really an interesting like innovation where manufacturers and brands are trying to, besides the food supplements, also provide gummies or even chewing tablets. I saw chewing gums as well at the trade fair last year, to present those immunity boosting ingredients in different forms. And the example I give here is from the French brand Les Miraculeux. And these are, as they call, immunity gummies. And they have a combination of different ingredients. So on the one hand, it's zinc and vitamin C. But these are combined with those immune boosting botanicals, in this specific case, echinacea, elderflower, and acerola. And apart from like a different way of like the presentation, there's also this increase in combining like the goal of immunity boosting with other health claims and benefits. So this is also what Gustavo already mentioned before. Like seen in research, it's really seen that consumers also often link like health immune system to other health conditions, such as, I don't know, having less stress, better sleep, more energy. And brands and manufacturers are really like, looking at that and tapping into that and providing a combination of those different ingredients in their products. And the example given here is from the Dutch brand Royal Green. And these are food supplements or food capsules, which contain on the one hand this echinacea for the immunity support, and on the other hand, Asian ginger to boost energy. And I think what is so interesting about this is that it really gives like opportunities because in general, like the innovative supplement manufacturers do look for like these new immune support ingredients, and this could really be like new ingredients to them, but it could also be like the inclusion of more like traditional ingredients that are used for like a different functionality. For instance, the green tea, which has like very high levels of antioxidants. But it could also be this combination of what you actually see in both examples I just gave, where a brand is really looking at how to strengthen or create interesting formulas where, like for instance, on the one hand, vitamins, which can actually have like health claims, how that's used with like this immune boosting botanicals as kept and provided as an interesting product to the European consumer. And this is of course interesting for brands as well, because it's a very crowded market with many different brands. And for the brand specifically, it's important to create this distinct profile for their own products and to stand out, right, to the consumers. And I think, but this is something we will repeat probably many times, but it is very important to say that ingredients always have to be proven by this efficacy and safety data. These are really like key requirements to actually enter the markets. As Gustavo also said, it's very well regulated, and you cannot just make any claim if it's not scientifically proven or doesn't have any clinical trials. And I think maybe some of you in the audience are thinking, okay, but yeah, how do you do this? I don't have the capacity, or I don't have the research facilities. And I like a way maybe to think about that is also to see like how you can build like those research partnerships and look out and collaborate with others, laboratories, etc., to do those kind of services for you. So I think on the last slide, I have an example of a South African company, which is called Efrigetics. And it's interesting because on their website, they actually publish the clinical studies and the scientific proof that they have done. In this case, specifically highlighting the efficacy of a specific botanical that they use for cough and cold medication. And this really is very important to have all of this in place to, yeah, in a scientific way, show that your product is, how do you say that, like good for the market. And I don't know, Gustavo, if this is also where you want to add some of the information, or maybe later.
I want to add two things. One is the collaboration also with universities, of course, not only laboratories, but also bibliographical evidence that is done in by PhD researchers and other university stakeholders, other academia. So this is super important also to search for these partnerships. Another thing that I wanted to add, which I should have mentioned in my part, is when you look at product launches, and what you said is very correct, you see a very dynamic and competitive landscape in food supplements when you compare with pure herbal medicinal products. And this has to do with the regulatory landscape, of course. If you look at the regulatory landscape for ingredients for medicinal products, you're looking indeed at very large, extensive clinical trials, clinical data, and many years that they need to prove, you know, efficacy and also safety of these ingredients. In food supplements, it's a bit of a different story. It's not like you don't have to prove safety in the ingredients, but there is more room in the regulatory landscape as well for product launches. That's what I mean here.
Yes, so another interesting thing that we see in the market is that there is like a growing interest in traditional medicines, and also related to that, like in the use of food supplements and specific ingredients that are part of this traditional health system. So in Europe, like traditional TCM stands for the traditional Chinese medicine, is one of the most well-known traditional health systems. But on the European market, like the fastest growing alternative medicine is Ayurvedic medicine. And I think we also have a lot of India and from Sri Lanka participants in the room. So this is, yeah, I think an interesting development. And this growing interest has several reasons. Well, one is this desire to live healthy, increase well-being. And of course, in our globalized world today, rituals are spread and become like well-known overseas. It's just a natural dynamic in today's world. But also in Europe, and this is specific in the case of Ayurveda, it's becoming quite popular among certain group of how do you say that, of society, let's say. For instance, to travel to India to practice yoga, like which is part of this whole Ayurvedic idea to boost body and mind, and accompany this with like specific diets and other lifestyle changes. And of course, when you go back to Europe, this is something that you are also looking for in the market. So you really see a growth in interest in ingredients that are really related to, in this case, Ayurvedic ingredients. What this means for maybe to go back one slide is seeing so used in the marketing story. this is just an example of a French brand, Natura Force, where they really use like this whole idea of traditional use. It's of course and how do you say that, like an opportunity to create like this distinctive marketing story to also influence the consumer's image of like the product effectiveness. If you can say that this ashwagandha has been used for many years in a traditional medicinal health system. So yeah, you really see that brands and well, in this case, brands are really using this as well in their own marketing story towards their consumers. And I think, yeah, in the next slide, yeah, because European brands offer so many products that include those traditional medicinal herbs or ingredients, let's maybe give some examples that are given here. So in this Ayurveda, like if you look at the market, like some of the ingredients that are really standing out that you see a lot on the European market as these standalone ingredients are ashwagandha, triphala, brahmi, and one of the ingredients that is growing most in the market, like in those product launches, are bitter melon. And in the case of traditional Chinese medicine, we see a lot of products based on dandelion, echinacea.
We lost the audio.
That stand out, and they're used like as food capsules, but also as the example on the right-hand side, as powders that are added to, I don't know, a drink or, yeah, I think most people would use it as a drink, but maybe also to smoothie, to a yogurt, these kind of things. And I think here I want to give, again, listen to what Gustavo has to say about the importance of like documenting, like if you use your ingredient and you're referring back to the traditional use, like this importance of documenting and validating this ancient tradition. And it goes a bit back to what he said before about yeah, how this works.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, traditional use also needs to be documented. As I explained in the EU herbal monographs, traditional use needs to be happening for at least 30 years in the countries of origin, at least 15 years in the EU. So it is quite extensive also in terms of scientific proof. As I mentioned before, safety data here is essential. And there's also a need for plausible efficacy data. So there should be a positive relationship to the claims and the functions, of course, and the efficacy of these ingredients on the market as well. And everything starts a little bit with gathering this information, as Lisanne mentioned before, and I will emphasize this a little bit later in the session, knowing the product, the botanical origin of the product, the chemotype of the product, and taking that further and knowing exactly what you're dealing with. But we'll discuss this a little bit later, but I just wanted to emphasize that it's not because it's traditional use that it doesn't need the scientific evidence, especially for safety here that we are talking about, and of course, plausible efficacy, as I mentioned before as well.
Yeah, and maybe just so as you can see at the previous slide, like at the bottom, we have a link to a study we specifically did on Ayurvedic ingredients. For those interested in reading a bit more, those are yeah, very extensive studies to find more examples and more ideas of how the European market works in that. So on the next slide, we're moving a little bit to a different kind of trend, but a very interesting one, especially this is a trend that is gaining a lot of interest in the industry. And this is very much or partly driven by the European Green Deal. And in a second, I will explain a little bit more about that. But it is based on the circular economy idea, which means reducing waste and using resources in the most efficient way. And this encourages businesses to see waste as a valuable resource. And that's actually what upcycling is all about. So it's really about turning waste into new products. so into valuable products. So turning waste into something valuable. And I think this is a great opportunity, how waste in one industry can actually be value in another, or even within the same industry. And the example I give here on the right-hand side is of the Dutch company Naturalhealth. They develop natural plant-based health ingredients. So what they do in this specific example is they use like the how do you call it, like the pulpy, like the residue that remains after carrots have been crushed to extract the juice to make a health ingredient. And of course, this health ingredient has scientifically and clinically proven health benefits. And this is now sold and used by brands and by other product formulators in their ingredients, in their product. So it's really interesting how like a byproduct, a waste product, is actually turned into a very valuable product. And other examples of that are using like the cakes from, for instance, from oil extraction, which is also a byproduct, as well as seeds from fruit drying. And I think the invitation here to all of you is really to look at your own value chain and like assess like the opportunities that you're maybe currently neglecting, and that you could actually take benefit of, because waste is not always or doesn't always have to be waste.
Yeah, maybe I would like to give an example. I have some colleagues from Tunisia connected, and we have been discussing so much that, you know, sometimes you have your value chain, you're an olive oil manufacturer, and the olive leaves are something that can be used for a health supplement, for example. So these are things that are important to keep in mind. If you're not exporting ingredients for health at this moment, if you're a food producer, if you're dealing with agriculture, to look at the value chain, analyze the opportunities that are being wasted at the moment, to really understand opportunity based on also the functionality of these ingredients in specific end markets. Oh, I think that's my turn, right?
Yes.
All right, let's bring it all together. So now, up to now, we have talked about defining regulation, defining where a product stands when you're speaking about the regulatory framework in Europe, and what the opportunities are that arise from this regulatory landscape as well. And also we talked about different trends that link the categories to specific ingredients. I would like to give you guys some tips on how to follow up on the opportunities that are created by these trends that we just mentioned here. So some key steps that are interesting for you guys as exporters are: first, product definition. Product definition is essential here. And products can be defined in different ways, and they should be defined in different ways. Botanical identification is the first step. So if you have an ingredient, it's important that you know that it belongs to a certain botanical class, that you have specified with reference in your country's herbarium or other references that you can have through bibliography or through scientific studies of what you're dealing with. What is this botanical that you have in your hands? And to relate that botanical identification with the chemotype, so with the components that make part of this botanical ingredient. So associating the botanical identification with the chemical analysis is super important here to start looking at the potential that your botanical has in the specific functionalities, of course, on the market. And of course, when you're communicating with the market and to yourself, actually also having clarity on the extraction methods that you need to have, and also the different ingredient presentations, such as liquid forms, powder forms, etc. And we're going to emphasize this later, the raw material origin. Where is it coming from? Is it from wild collection? Is it cultivation? Can you replicate and can you have a consistent product profile when you're dealing with an ingredient that has the same components throughout the years? This is a very important question, and it's a very important question when you want to work with ingredients for health. The regulatory status, also important to understand if you're allowed to market this ingredient and for what uses. Some ingredients, they're allowed for food supplements, but not necessarily are they allowed for a herbal medicinal product. So it's important that you understand also the regulatory framework and the regulatory burden that you have when you want to market a specific ingredient. And having said that, different industries, different segments, different buyers will require specific documentation for you to market your ingredients in that segment. And here we are talking about three basic documentation elements. The technical data sheet, which basically describes the characteristics and the parameters that you can expect when you analyze that ingredient. This can come from bibliographical data, can come from existing studies. The safety data sheet, which basically refers to the handling of these ingredients that doesn't cause any harm to humans, the environment, etc. And also the certificate of analysis, which proves that your ingredient is according to the technical data sheet parameters. So the certificate of analysis will prove that when you analyze this product, it's falling within the parameters that you have identified in your technical data sheet. And of course, you need the certificates of compliance. For example, if you're dealing with a botanical ingredient for health use, for a medicinal product, you do need to have your ingredients from coming from good agriculture and collection practices. Of course, agriculture, if it's cultivated, collection, if it's coming from wild collection. And these you can find according to the World Health Organization has a guide on that. GMP, good manufacturing practices, because here you're dealing with an active substance. When you talk about a botanical ingredient that is used in a herbal medicine, you're talking about an active substance that has curative effect. So you do need good manufacturing practice for that as well. And of course, some of your buyers will also ask for EU organic compliance, etc., etc. And also here we're talking beyond, we're also talking about some certifications that might be needed in terms of the social impact. Very important and very interesting how this is also related to how you define your product. And last but not least, to start researching the commercial use of these ingredients. Only because it's allowed, it doesn't mean that it's already used extensively. So important to relate the regulatory framework to the actual commercial usage of these ingredients. And here you have different opportunities to investigate in terms of buyers that already use these ingredients, in what forms. As Lisanne already mentioned, sometimes these are used in very innovative products, formulations on the market, ingredients that are part of product launches, for example. And of course, to keep yourselves updated on different newsletters, company websites, and also the trade shows. Investigating trade shows is also a very essential step in finding out if an ingredient has extensive use on the market or not. Lisanne already mentioned VitaFoods, which takes place yearly in Geneva, and also we have food and health ingredients. Also on the European market, you have a bunch of trade fairs there that actually deal with these ingredients as well. I think we'll move on. Lisanne, is there anything you'd like to add in those aspects, or pretty much covers it?
Yes, I think so. I think now there are some slides more on sustainability, and from there we will continue with like the impact on SMEs. Because I think, yeah, when we talk about the European market, we cannot not talk about sustainability, because this has become like very much an important element in Europe. Where it was once voluntary, the European Union has now like included so many sustainability policies into its regulations, where it has not become an option anymore. It's really obligatory to comply with certain regulations. And this means that companies doing business in Europe, but also with Europe, will have to comply with certain sustainability requirements. And this also means that you as an exporter will have to be able to document and prove certain things. And that makes them transparency and traceability have become very important aspects in the value, or in the supply chain. But here I want to maybe highlight two specific policies or frameworks that are specifically important. I'm sure all of you, most of you at least, will have heard of the European Green Deal. And this is a very comprehensive plan of Europe to make Europe's economy more sustainable. And the European Green Deal is really about protecting nature, cutting down on pollution, and like really encouraging this idea of this circular economy where things get reused and recycled. And it's it's still, so it's a framework. So new regulations and changes are coming out all the time, I would say. So I would really recommend reading like on the European Commission website how things are developing, and also just have like a more general understanding of what it means and how it could impact your business. On the CBI website, you can find a specific study on this, which I think is very relevant, yeah, to at least like have a look and see if there is, if it could be of any help for you. And apart from European Green Deal, I would like to briefly mention this EU directive on corporate sustainability due diligence, because this will also have quite an impact on some companies, because this directive means that European companies need to like really check out and understand their own supply chain and make sure that that they are not causing any harm to the people or the environment, like throughout their whole the whole chain. And if they find any problems, they've got to like fix it, make it better, and make sure that it's not going to happen in the future. And this means that importers also like are obliged to do due diligence on their suppliers, which again means for exporters that you will be required to really provide specific information on your environmental and social impact. So although these regulations are maybe not necessarily directed at you, it will absolutely have an impact, because it will just, how do you say that, trickle down throughout the supply chain, where in the end everyone has to give a little bit of their information to help everyone comply with these new regulations. And I think, Gustavo, you're gonna go a little bit deeper on these topics in the next slides, right?
Yeah, so here we can see transparency and evidence-based claims also. So evidence-based sustainability claims. It's very important to pay attention here that reporting is an important part of this whole thing. Before going into that, I just wanted to say that the EU Green Deal is associated with lowering carbon emissions and a better impact on the environment and also human health associated to economic growth. So it's not stopping economic growth at the expense. It's not economic growth at the expense of environmentally correct actions. It's actually hand in hand with economic growth, and that's why there's very strong dialogue with industry associations as well. And industry associations are umbrella organizations that also have felt the impact of the new directives and have been adopting a lot of initiatives also at industry level to correct some of the sustainability practices of their members. I just wanted to give an example here. I will emphasize the Food Supplements Europe, but I also wanted to just highlight how all the industry associations, they do have sustainability priorities as well. It's important when you talk about industries like food, health, etc. It's also interesting to look what the priorities are from industry associations and their members, because then you understand a little bit that's how you should be marketing and how you should be correcting some of your actions in the supply chain as well. As you can see here in the Code of Conduct of Food Supplements Europe on the right-handed side, the Food Supplements Europe as an organization and its members are committed to integrating sustainability practices into their operations. So this is pretty big, and this is also having everything to do with the European Green Deal, because the deal is a big strategy that is composed by directives, laws, and things that are coming out of this big strategy. So the strategy in itself cannot be implemented as such. It's composed by different parts, and one of these parts is the farm to fork strategy. So that's why it's affecting food supplements and Food Supplements Europe as an association more directly, because as I mentioned before, food supplements, they fall within the regulatory framework of foodstuffs. So you can see that part of this farm to fork strategy has been to also correct the actions of the private sector that are associated with food. So you can see here the EU Code of Conduct on responsible food business and marketing practices is directly related to that. The idea of this code of conduct is to increase availability and affordability of healthy and sustainable food options that help reduce the environmental footprint. So you can see here there's a strong association between also human health and the environment. So it's not only about having a positive impact on the environment, but also availability of healthy options for consumers. This EU Code of Conduct was signed by more than 65 companies and associations in Europe, including Food Supplements Europe. So this shows you how, as Lisanne said, the European Green Deal trickles down to sector associations and how they also make commitments and how their members are also committing to the principles of sustainability at an industry level as well. Important to understand, as Lisanne already mentioned, traceability and positive social environmental impact, economic, and also governance, and how governance plays a role in this whole scenario. And this is what I wanted to give you guys as some of the steps here, or some of the implications that I can see for suppliers in third countries, in countries outside of the EU, is that there are much stricter checks and controls on suppliers, but also on subcontractors. We used to talk about traceability in terms of one step up, one step down, but this is much more extensive now. So we are looking more into the value chain and trying to understand how we can alleviate and mitigate some of these risks that we can see in the supply chain for natural ingredients as well. Some of the natural ingredient supply chains, they are very extensive. They're full of risks. The risks that can be of a social, environmental, economic, or governance nature. So you can see here some of the examples of the controls and the risks that are associated with these controls. They can be, for example, related to access and benefit sharing mechanisms, that when you're sourcing your ingredients, you are respecting and rewarding the traditional users of these ingredients in the supply chain. Fair payment of collectors and farmers, preservation of biodiversity and of endangered species, mitigation of carbon emissions, all throughout the supply chain, appropriate occupational health and safety measures at the processing plant, measures against fraud and adulteration, which has everything to do with governance, and of course, transparency and evidence-based claims. So reporting, data, documentation has become more and more important here, because this is exactly what European importers are asking for. If you claim, you have to document it, and they need this documentation for them to comply with their own obligations, duties before the European authorities. So as Lisanne said, sometimes we think about EU Green Deal and due diligence as something that European players have to comply with, but they trickle down to suppliers in terms of providing this information and in terms of having evidence for the information that is provided throughout the supply chain. So what else do I have to say here? Okay, so yeah, the natural ingredient supply chain is full of risks. This can be social, environmental, economic, and also related to governance. And exporting SMEs, as we understand, are under a lot of compliance and documentation pressure. So we do understand that, and also it's not something that European buyers do not understand, because they also need to comply based on the information that you provide. And we also understand here that this, of course, has high implications in terms of higher costs, and of course, in terms of lack of resources, both in terms of documentation, but also in terms of sometimes knowledge on, throughout the supply chain. And as I say here, European market and the market players, your buyers, will also adapt, and they're still adapting to these new regulations. So when we are talking about compliance mechanisms, European buyers also need to report. They need to report on sustainability. They need to provide this evidence to their authorities. So there is space for dialogue. That's what I wanted to say here, and for joint solutions. What is important to know in this context is that you're not only a supplier of an ingredient, you're also a supplier, you're a company, and you have your principles, you have your operations, and this is very important to a buyer. A buyer will not only look at you as a supplier of ingredients under product specifications, but also in your company operations. And both the product and the company need to match the expectations of a certain buyer. So communication, ethics, preventive measures, these are all important as well. Not only the quality of the product, so the quality of your operations, your processes, but also your ethics are very important here to comply with buyer expectations. Also important to find feasible solutions to work through these obligations that buyers have before the authorities and that you have before your own buyer. So for example, you see that codes of conduct, ethical sourcing policies can also go a long way. Do not hesitate to create specific procedures to source. Do not hesitate to report. Do not hesitate to be transparent, because you might not be perfect yet, but you can show your roadmap towards this aimed perfection. So it's important to be realistic. It's important to be transparent, because as I mentioned before, you are not only your product, you are your company, your principles, and your operations as well. What are some of the key steps that we recommend here to you guys when dealing with all these issues that we raised in terms of sustainability developments? Well, first is to identify the risks along your supply chain. Depending on where the country you are, depending on the ingredient that you work with, you're going to find different risks along your supply chain. And also these risks, they can be of a social, environmental, it can be economic risks, it can be governance risks. So for example, low payment of farmers and collectors, potential pesticide residue contamination along your supply chain. These are all risks that you can find along the supply chain for natural ingredients. And also, maybe you do have opportunities that you can find because you already have operations and activities that can be used as opportunities. Example, maybe you have a good gender balance at your company's board. You have innovative ways to involve youth in wild collection, because we know that there's a lot of rural migration from rural areas to cities, which affect the sustainability of natural ingredient supply chains, that you do not have enough workforce to work as in cultivation or wild collection of natural ingredients. And maybe you already have some climate change resilient practices, for example. So it's important to identify risks, but also opportunities when you're looking at each step of your supply chain. Be aware that this can be social, this can be environmental, and this can have different faces. Also important to classify their potential impact. Are you talking about something that has a low impact, medium impact, or high impact? So important that you know the scale of this risk or this opportunity. And of course, that you can investigate what are your current and proposed solutions as a company. For example, you might already have some practices, codes of conducts, policies, and standards that can alleviate and mitigate some of these risks and potentialize some of these opportunities you identify along your supply chain. And very important here, and that's what I wanted to finish with, it's also important that you have evidence and that you think about how you communicate on this to your existing and potential buyers. So these are the steps that we can recommend to you guys as it stands now. And it's not, of course, too late to start. And it's also not too late to recognize your own risks and also your potential opportunities within your natural ingredient supply chain. And you have several examples. When you look at buyers' websites, you can really see what their main priorities are in terms of their policies and the way that they work with suppliers. So it's important that you guys are able to, relate to what buyers are asking for when you look through their existing materials. This has been very extensive, and we were promising to allocate more time for the questions, but here we are to answer some of the questions.
Thanks a lot, Gustavo and Lisanne, for this very concrete presentation and very useful for our audience. Yeah, it's 4:13 Central European time, so we still have a small 15 minutes for the questions. Actually, we had quite a lot of them, and maybe we can start with grouping some of the questions that were a lot about identifying European buyers. Some of them were very specific ingredients, but it can be interesting for us and for you guys to go through a few. For instance, Ayat Smail from Algeria. We are a small export company, I see, from Algeria. We seek to export quickly in prickly pear oil, but we face some difficulties in finding serious customers in foreign markets. What are your tips so that we can build relationships with merchants in this field?
Yeah. In my understanding, also here we are not talking about natural ingredients for cosmetics, but I'm going to make it a little bit wider just to so if you look at that first figure, you have to also look at the big sector that you're targeting. For prickly pear seed oil, of course, we're talking mostly about the cosmetics market as it is now, because we're talking about specific applications there. Also the approvals and the INCI code that is already established for, sorry, not the INCI code, the INCI name that is already established for prickly pear seed oil, and also the usages that are already given by many cosmetics brands to prickly pear seed oil. So important here is to place first within the natural ingredients world, what industry you're actually talking about. So for prickly pear seed oil, I recommend that you actually read the study that was published in the Natural Ingredients for Cosmetics website of CBI. Very extensive study and very interesting to see potential there. Can I go a little bit more on the prickly pear seed oil? Okay. Something that we detected in trade shows in cosmetics, which is a trade show for cosmetic ingredients, is that there's a strong need for the end market to move, for consumers to know more about prickly pear seed oil, and also for manufacturers to use it more in their formulation. So it's not always trying to push the oil, but also working a little bit on promotion. So you have your competition, you're from Algeria, you have your competition from Morocco, you have your competition from Tunisia. Be aware to study competition and also study the formulations it's already used in, and also the direct importers you can offer this product to. Because in a lot of cosmetic products, you're going to find that you have an importer in between your brand, your formulator, and you yourself as an exporter. So be aware of that.
Thank you, Gustavo. We also have quite a few questions about R&D process. For instance, Ange Assal, do you know how brands select their ingredients to innovate? And do you know anything about their R&D process?
Wow, very complex question. I think it depends a lot if it's a very established company, if they have operations in countries, for example. A lot of the bigger companies, they have years and years of experience at source. So they have their trusted network and they look for ingredients with their trusted network in the supply countries. And I think startups, they offer a lot of opportunity for innovation, and they actually sometimes go to trade shows to even see what is there in terms of ingredients. So this will change according to the level of the your buying companies as well, like, and how established they are, and maybe how traditional they work through supply chains as well. But I think one thing Lisanne mentioned was this saturated and this startup sort of dynamic of the supplements market. So pay attention to these companies that are popping up, and that's why the newsletters are very interesting here. Sometimes you see in newsletters, you can see these companies offering new, formulations, solutions, etc., which could be quite interesting. I don't know if it answered fully the question, and Lisanne, feel free to complement.
I've also seen a lot of questions regarding suppliers who want to identify whether there's demand for their product in Europe. So what steps would you recommend them?
The steps, it's more or less what I had shown before, but I'll just break that down into different steps. First, to be aware of what you have, right? Because sometimes a company might think they have a certain species and variety in their hands, but it turns out that in the botanical identification, they actually find something different. And when they associated that with the chemotype, they find components that are not part of what they thought they had in hand. So first is knowing the product and knowing exactly what you're offering to the market. So botanical identification, chemical analysis are essential steps to know what you have. Once you know the ingredient that you want to offer, is the regulatory status. So knowing whether you can use a certain ingredient and for what use and for what type of industry. Is there a potential in the herbal medicinal product, or is it only for food supplements, for example? And then within that, you have different ways to find your opportunities. And what I would advise to know, to sort of how to say, to use as a thermometer of market activity is what we mentioned before. Companies' websites, product launches. You can also use newsletters. You have Nutrition Insights that I mentioned before. You have the Innova Market Insights. There are several tools that you can use there. And also, if you have the resources to go to trade shows or to check even the websites of trade shows to see which companies are operating there and look at their categories, of activity. And you will find the ingredients there that are associated with these categories. This is a bit of a artisanal way of doing it, of course, but this is the way to do it as an exporter. And I think, Lisanne, you had other tips there in terms of finding buyers, right?
Exactly, yeah. We have a lot of studies on our website that you can see about this subject, of course. I see a lot of questions also on certification. So maybe you can recap the basic steps for suppliers of natural ingredients to certify their products.
Yeah, maybe the first step is what the market is asking you for as mandatory. So compliance with standards is super important if you want to target this market. So when I talk about compliance, I mean for a herbal medicinal product, the ingredients that compose the active substances, they have to go through compliance of good agriculture collection practices. Okay, so this is for you to keep in mind if you want to work with this industry. This is sort of the baseline, plus the processing to be certified, to be in compliance with good manufacturing practices. There are buyers that will ask you for EU organic certification. Sometimes the certification might not show in the final product, but it is a way in a B2B form to mitigate risks. So to avoid pesticide residues, for example. So pay attention to what your buyer is asking you for. I see more and more that buyers that are asking for organic certification are moving beyond, and sometimes they do ask for certifications or standards that deal with social impact as well. Pay attention to whether your buyers are asking for SMETA, for example, or something related to Fair for Life, Fair Wild, UEBT. Try and respond to this market and try to understand why the certification is being asked for. What risk in the supply chain is your buyer trying to mitigate by adopting certain certifications? If you do not have a certification, try to understand which steps you need to comply, and try to understand exactly, of course, the costs, and as well as how much your buyer can be involved in your roadmap for compliance.
Thank you.
If you want to add something, sorry, just.
I also have an interesting question of an importer based in the Netherlands. It's Mailing Macias. She just started her company, and she wants to import natural ingredients. And she's asking, what trade shows do you recommend in order to find reliable exporters? Very important question.
Yeah, I think Lisanne can answer. She actually went to a few this last year.
I'm sorry, I was just reading a question to add maybe to. So please, I didn't catch the question.
Yeah, we have an importer based in the Netherlands who just started his business, and they want to import natural ingredients, and they would like advice about which trade shows you recommend in order to find reliable exporters.
Exporter. Well, I think in Europe, VitaFoods is a very important trade show, which we have mentioned several times now. And VitaFoods also has, how to say that, editions elsewhere. I don't dare to say where exactly, but I believe in Asia there's one, maybe in Latin America. But definitely check out the website, because this is also a place, of course, where you will find many people from different areas of the world. And I think VitaFoods is an important one if you are looking into organic, Biofach, which just took place last month. There's also an offer, could be interesting depending on the specific ingredients you're looking for. But again, here I would definitely recommend reading on the website, because we have a study which is about finding buyers, and that's also where we make mention of the trade shows, and also how to see and how to search on their exhibitor list and see who is there, what are their profile, to see if it is an interesting trade fair for you, and also to make the most out of it. Yes.
Just to complement, the food and health ingredients also taking place. It's alternating. This year will be in Frankfurt and sometimes in Paris, but it's now 2 years in Frankfurt in a row. Also important to approach the business support organizations from specific countries. So for example, in Tunisia, we've been working with the business support organization. In Albania, and also CBI has very close contact with business support organizations that can provide an umbrella way of looking into suppliers according to your needs. Sister programs, of course, IPD is a sister program of CBI working in different origins. Through the CBI programs, very importantly, the companies go through audits, the companies go through selection. So interesting here to also link up with CBI according to your need as well.
Thank you, Gustavo. I also see a few questions about moringa. For instance, Hassoun Rayapaksa, we develop high quality moringa powder as per EU guidelines, but market prices are very low in Europe. Very difficult to find buyers. How is the moringa powder market right now in Europe?
Yeah, it's hard to interpret in what respect, because as I said, it's very competitive. Moringa is produced by different origins, and that's why the offer and the price, for that matter, is competitive as well. Sometimes you have a very endemic species, you know, that the market is not extensive, but you have high prices because it's endemic. It's because it's coming from a specific country and there's not wide availability. So you will find a lot of product launches also for moringa. You will see a lot if you look at this the Nutrition Insights and all these newsletters. You will find a lot of product launches as well. So here you have dynamic market, but at the same time you have a wide offer as well. I would recommend in this case to look at where the gap is in terms of your competitors, to try and market it maybe with a social component. And this is what I say, like, don't market your product only under specifications, product specifications, but also your company's mission, your value, your value proposition as a company, because that might attract buyers that are willing to pay higher prices and also work with you because of what you stand for as well. Not only because of your product quality, but also because of who they're working with. It's hard to change the market. It's hard to say, okay, well, and also to classify the market, because it is a product with different origins. But what you can do as a company is to study your competitors and also to try and identify your value proposition. I'm just repeating myself here just to summarize a little bit the conclusion. So there's a study also on CBI website on moringa specifically. So if you go into the natural ingredients for health products, you will find an extensive study on moringa as well.
Thank you, Gustavo. Lisana, did you see some questions that alerted you and you find interesting to cover?
I think many of the questions asked, and also I think we can already say that we will try to get back of most of your questions. Even after this webinar, we will try to follow up on those questions. But as a general comment, and I've said that before, and Gustavo also just mentioned, like on the website of CBI, there's a lot of information that is answering some of the questions several of you have been asking. So I would definitely recommend to have a good look and scroll through the website, because in the beginning, Edward already said it out, like there's like specific product fact sheets, but there's also these more general fact sheets on how to do business, how to find buyers, how to export. And this is really, could be like a great starting point to find, like, how to say that, like to kickstart like some of the activities and the questions that I've been reading. And I
Yeah,
think
it's more about processes, right? How to start looking into buyers, how to do something,
exactly.
and then to do the checks on your specific ingredients. So to do that, what we advise, regulatory checks, to check for commercial uses, etc. So once it's processed, the other one is the content of your ingredient.
Very clear. It's now 4:30 Central European time. So we will end this session shortly. And please keep in mind that our presenters will be able to follow up the questions that were not treated. And so that will be, of course, interesting for you to look back and this session on our websites, and that will be shortly published. And we also send the presentation to all of you through mail, so that will be also an option for you. So it's now time for me to thank you for participating to this session, and we hope you learned a lot about the sector, or that you confirmed a lot of your impressions about the European market. And I hope to see you soon on the CBI website or in one of our projects, of course. Wishing you a very nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.